The world unfolded before her in a symphony of lines and contrasts, each pulse painting an image that no one else could see. The edges of buildings shimmered like distant mountains, their silhouettes vibrating with faint echoes of pain. Trees whispered their own soft, sorrowful melodies, and the footsteps of children rippled through her awareness like gentle ripples caressing the shore. To others, her gaze might seem unfocused, but to her, the world was alive with frequency and form, a breathtaking dance of invisible beauty. Her name was Elara, a name that seemed to sing when spoken. Blind since birth, she had never known the vibrant hues of the visual world, yet she saw far more than most. From a young age, she had possessed a gift, a magical ability to sense the pain of others, not as words or cries, but as currents of energy in vivid, pulsing colors. These frequencies painted a world that was uniquely hers, a world where emotions and struggles were as tangible as the earth beneath her feet. Elara had learned to navigate this world with grace, her cane tapping a steady rhythm as she walked. But it was in the classroom where her gift truly came alive. Here, surrounded by the unfiltered emotions of children, she could feel their struggles pressing against her awareness. Her sightless eyes perceived an extraordinary tapestry of light and motion, each thread alive with emotion and meaning. Each child carried their own pain, their own colors, and Elara could feel the weight of their unspoken struggles as clearly as if they had whispered them into her ear. To her students, she was more than a teacher. She was a guide, a quiet force who seemed to understand them in ways no one else could. What they didn't know was that every day, Elara used her gift to bring balance to their world. She could sense the jagged, fiery reds of anger, the murky grays of loneliness, and the trembling blues of fear. And through her presence, her words, and her unwavering belief in their potential, she helped to soften those colors, blending them into something harmonious, something hopeful. Elara's classroom was a sanctuary, a place where the cacophony of life quieted into a gentle hum. But even in this haven, there were 3 children whose pain stood out like thunderclouds on a bright horizon. She didn't know their names yet, but she felt them. 3 distinct frequencies that resonated deep within her, calling to her in a way she couldn't ignore. Each one vibrating with a distinct resonance, like unique chords in a symphony, drawing her closer with their silent plea. She knew their journeys would be unlike any she had faced before. Though she couldn't see their faces, she felt the faint stirrings of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope, and the sense that these 3 lives would forever change her own. Elara took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the familiar, comforting texture of the desk in front of her. "Let's begin," she murmured softly to herself, her voice steady and filled with quiet determination. The currents flowed around her, vibrant and alive, and she stepped forward into the day, ready to weave their stories into her own. Elara sat quietly in the stillness of the evening, the familiar hum of her modest apartment surrounding her. She traced the edges of her teacup with her fingers, feeling the warm ceramic against her skin. The world outside her window pulsed faintly in her awareness, the soft murmur of passing cars, the steady rhythm of a neighbor's footsteps, and the occasional distant bark of a dog. Each sound sent gentle ripples through the intricate map of her mind, a world she understood with an intimacy that sight could never offer. Her thoughts drifted back to the classroom, to the 3 distinct frequencies that had stood out among the usual symphony of her students. She could still see the jagged edges of anger, fiery red and unrelenting, the heavy weight of sorrow, dark and oppressive, and the trembling fragility of fear, pale and flickering like a candle in the wind. Each resonated with an intensity that left her breathless, but also determined. She'd felt pain before, its complexity as varied as the ocean. She thought of the times her gift had faltered, when she hadn't found the right words or presence to soothe. The memory of a boy, silent and withdrawn, haunted her still, his pain a storm she hadn't been able to calm. It served as both a reminder of her limits and a motivation to try harder. In her years of teaching, she'd come to recognize its many forms. There was the sharp, flickering pain of anger, the dull, throbbing ache of loneliness, and the restless, shifting discomfort of fear. But these 3, these were different. They were deeper, more complex, as if woven from threads that stretched far beyond the walls of her classroom. Elara took a slow sip of her tea, the warmth grounding her as she let her gift unfold again in her mind. Her apartment, sparse but adorned with small mementos of her journey, seemed to hum with quiet energy. A simple painting on the wall, a gift from a former student, depicted a sun rising over calm waters, a symbol of hope she often returned to. She did not shy away from the intensity of what she felt. Instead, she leaned into it, allowing herself to truly see the pain that others carried. It was not an easy thing, bearing witness to such raw emotion, but it was her gift, her purpose. Each frequency, no matter how tumultuous, had the potential for harmony. She'd seen it before, anger softening into understanding, grief dissolving into acceptance. Even the most chaotic waves could be calmed with the right touch, words, or presence. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the classroom, painting soft patterns on the polished floors. Elara stood at her desk, her fingers lightly brushing the smooth surface as she oriented herself to the room. Though her eyes couldn't see the gentle glow of the morning, she felt the warmth in the air and the hum of eager young voices. Her students were arriving one by one, their footsteps filling the room with a lively cadence. Each step was like a note in a symphony only she could hear. A wave of sound and emotion, she translated effortlessly into a vibrant picture of her surroundings. 3 distinct frequencies rose above the rest, each one pulling at her senses like an unfinished chord. These were the children she had felt so strongly the day before, their pain resonating in ways that set them apart from their peers. Yet within each wave of pain, she sensed faint traces of potential, a spark that hinted at growth if given the right care. Today, she would meet them. The first child entered hesitantly, his movements slow and deliberate. She felt the jagged pulse of his presence before she heard his voice. His pain was sharp, fiery, and erratic, like red lightning slicing through the calm. His name was Liam. When he spoke, his words carried a defensiveness that hinted at a boy used to fighting battles he couldn't win. "Good morning, Liam," Elara said gently, her voice soft but steady. "Welcome to the class. Your seat is right up front. I think you'll enjoy it here." Liam paused, his silence charged with a flicker of mistrust. Yet in that moment of hesitation, Elara thought she caught a fleeting sense of curiosity beneath the defensiveness, like a small ember waiting to ignite. But he obeyed, shuffling to his desk and sitting with a slouched posture that spoke of weariness far beyond his years. The second child entered moments later, her steps almost silent. The frequency she brought with her was low and heavy, a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to fill the room with shadows. Elara recognized the weight of sorrow immediately. Her name was Amina, and she carried herself with an almost invisible demeanor, as if she were trying to fade into the background. "Good morning, Amina," Elara greeted her warmly. "You're in the second row, near the window. It's a lovely spot." Amina murmured a soft, "Thank you," and drifted to her seat, her presence lingering like a cloud heavy with rain. But as she settled by the window, Elara felt a whisper of hope, like the gentle stirring of a breeze before the skies cleared. Elara sensed the depth of her sorrow, profound and unspoken, but she also sensed a faint glimmer of resilience, like a single star in a dark sky. Finally, the third child arrived, his energy trembling and uncertain. The frequency he carried was fragile, like a glass orb on the verge of shattering. His pain was the raw, nervous kind, fear mixed with longing, a desperate need for reassurance. His name was Matteo, and his small footsteps wavered as he approached the door. "Good morning, Matteo," Elara said with an encouraging smile. "You'll be sitting near the front, close to me. You'll be just fine." Matteo hesitated, his presence flickering like a candle caught in a breeze. Yet, as he moved to his seat, Elara noticed the faintest pulse of determination, a fragile but promising rhythm beneath the fear. Her reassuring tone seemed to steady him, and he shuffled to his seat, his tiny frame radiating both apprehension and hope. As the classroom settled, Elara took a moment to breathe deeply, her hands resting lightly on the edge of her desk. She could feel the colors and currents of her students shifting around her, a mosaic of emotions and energy. But it was Liam, Amina, and Matteo who stood out the most, their frequencies distinct and urgent. These 3 children were her turning points, she realized. Each of their journeys would challenge her patience, compassion, and resilience. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a certainty that she could help, that she could guide them towards something brighter, just as they might help her find the harmony she sought within herself. She didn't have all the answers, but she had her gift, her resolve, and the knowledge that even the most turbulent waves could find harmony. "Let's begin," she said softly, her voice filled with determination. And with those words, she stepped into the unknown, ready to guide her students and herself toward a brighter horizon. The classroom was alive with a quiet hum of activity, but Elara's focus had narrowed to a single moment, a fragile connection forming before her. Amina, seated by the window, had been silent and withdrawn since the start of the day. Her pencil lay untouched on the desk, her head bowed, as if the weight of the world pressed on her shoulders. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk tightly, the slight tremble revealing the storm of thoughts swirling within her. Elara approached slowly, her cane tapping lightly against the floor. She could feel the shadows around Amina, dense, heavy, and unyielding, but within them, a faint glimmer of light flickered, like a star breaking through the clouds. In the background, the hum of the classroom continued, distant but steady, as if the world paused just slightly to witness this fragile moment. "Amina," Elara said softly, kneeling beside her desk. Her voice was gentle, each word deliberate. Sometimes the hardest part of the journey is taking the first step, but even a small step can lead to something beautiful. Amina's hand trembled as it reached for the pencil. She glanced up briefly, her dark eyes meeting Elara's sightless ones. For a moment, Elara felt a wave of hesitation, almost as if Amina was testing the waters of trust. "What if it's not good enough?" Amina whispered, her voice barely audible. Elara smiled, her hand resting gently on the edge of the desk. "Do you know what I've learned?" she asked. "Perfection isn't the goal. It's the effort, the courage to try that truly matters. Every great story starts with a single word." Amina's pencil touched the paper hesitantly, drawing a shaky line. The line became a letter, and then a word. As the word took shape, the dark shadows around her seemed to shift, softening ever so slightly. Elara imagined the ripple this small step might create. A future where Amina's quiet resilience could become a source of strength. Elara felt the flicker of hope grow stronger, a steady pulse against the sorrow that had long enveloped the girl. "That's it," Elara said, her voice steady with encouragement. "One step at a time." Amina's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was fleeting, but it was real. In that moment, Elara knew she had taken the first step, not with Amina, but towards something greater. It was a beginning, fragile yet full of possibility. Liam was the first to surprise her. The jagged red energy that usually surrounded him seemed to simmer rather than spike. He sat at his desk, his pencil scratching softly against the paper, with focused determination over the math problems Elara had assigned. For the first time, his frustration wasn't a flare of anger, but a controlled determination to solve each question. Elara approached slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile calm. "Liam," she said gently, "I can see you're working hard. How do you feel about this problem set?" He paused, his pencil hovering midair. "It's not bad," he admitted, his voice gruff but lacking its usual defensiveness. "I think I'm getting it." Elara smiled, her heart lifting. "You're doing more than getting it," she said. "You're taking control of it. That's a powerful thing, Liam." His energy flickered, momentarily tinged with a faint orange, hope. He didn't say anything more, but his posture straightened, and he returned to his work with renewed purpose. Matteo, on the other hand, was struggling. His fingers tapped nervously against the desk, the rhythmic sound underscoring his trembling frequency, which flickered with erratic light. Elara had sensed his unease growing as the day progressed, a fragile thread ready to snap. She knelt beside his desk, her voice low and steady. "Matteo, what's on your mind?" He looked up at her, his wide eyes brimming with uncertainty. I can't do it," he whispered. "It's too hard." Elara placed a comforting hand on the edge of his desk. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Matteo?" she asked. "I see someone who keeps trying, even when it's hard. That's what courage looks like." His trembling slowed, the flickering light around him stabilizing slightly. "But what if I mess up?" "Then you try again," Elara said with a warm smile. "Mistakes are just steps toward learning." and I'm here to help you take those steps." Matteo nodded slowly. His hands steadied, and he picked up his pencil again. His lines were shaky, his answers uncertain, but he kept going. Elara felt the first stirrings of confidence in his frequency, like a seed taking root. At the end of the day, Elara sat alone at her desk, her fingers tracing the polished grain of the wood. The classroom was quiet now, the hum of energy from her students replaced with a tranquil stillness. She closed her eyes and let herself reflect on the progress she had witnessed. Liam's simmering energy, no longer overtaken by anger, had revealed a boy capable of focus and growth. Matteo's fragile light, though faint, had begun to steady, showing the first signs of resilience. And Amina's shadows, once so heavy, had shifted to allow glimpses of light to shine through, her tentative smile from earlier in the day lingering in Elara's memory. Each child was taking steps, small and unsteady, but steps nonetheless, and with each step, Elara felt her own gift deepening. The colors and frequencies that painted her world had become brighter, more harmonious, as if their progress resonated within her. "One step at a time," she murmured, her voice filled with resolve. She rose, gathering her belongings, and stepped into the evening, carrying the hope of the day with her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she allowed herself to savor the breakthroughs that had been made. The classroom was alive with a quiet anticipation. Elara had spent the morning preparing for a new activity, one that would encourage her students to work together and uncover the strengths they could bring out in each other. She sensed the potential for growth, but also the challenges that might arise when vulnerable children were asked to collaborate. On each desk, she placed sheets of paper and small pots of paint. The faint, sharp scent of the paint lingered in the air, mingling with the soft rustle of movement from the students. The task was simple. As a group, they would create a mural to depict a single word: strength. Each child would contribute their own interpretation of the word, weaving their unique perspectives into a collective piece. Liam, Amina, and Matteo were seated together, a deliberate choice by Elara. She could feel the currents of their energies shifting uneasily. Liam's simmering red-orange aura had begun to soften over the past week, but it still flared when he felt challenged. Amina's light remained faint, her shadows hovering nearby, while Matteo's fragile glow flickered with the uncertainty that often overtook him. "This is stupid," Liam muttered as Elara handed him the paints. His tone was gruff, but his hands reached for the brush with a tentative eagerness. "Art doesn't have to be perfect," Elara said gently. "It just has to be yours." Matteo sat beside him, clutching his brush tightly. "What if I mess it up?" he whispered. "Then we'll fix it together," Elara replied. "Strength isn't about being perfect. It's about trying, even when it's hard." Amina stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the paper in front of her. Her hand hovered hesitantly above the page, as though the first stroke might shatter the stillness around her. Elara knelt beside her, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Amina, you don't have to start big. Even a single line can be the beginning of something beautiful." The three children began hesitantly. Liam's strokes were bold but rough, his brush moving with an energy that demanded attention. The soft sound of bristles scraping against paper echoed his determination. Matteo's lines were delicate, wavering slightly, but there was an earnestness to his effort. Amina's marks were small and timid at first, but as she added more, they began to flow into gentle, curving patterns. "Hey, that looks cool," Liam said, pointing to one of Amina's swirls. His voice carried a rare softness, surprising both Amina and himself. She glanced up, startled, before a faint smile appeared on her lips. "Thanks," she murmured. "Yours looks like fire." "It's supposed to," Liam said with a shrug, but there was a note of pride in his voice. As the mural took shape, the frequencies around the table began to shift. The jagged edges of Liam's energy smoothed further, blending with the softer hues of Matteo's light and the emerging brightness of Amina's presence. Elara stood nearby, her sightless eyes perceiving the growing harmony. By the time the mural was complete, the three children were speaking softly, their initial hesitations replaced with a budding camaraderie. The mural was far from perfect, but it was vibrant, alive with colors that reflected each of them. Elara stepped forward. "What do you see when you look at this?" she asked. Matteo was the first to speak. "It's strong," he said. Like we all made it stronger together. Liam nodded. Yeah, it's not bad. Amina's voice was soft but clear. It's ours. Elara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. The mural was more than a piece of art. It was a testament to their progress, a step toward understanding themselves and each other. She could feel their frequencies settling into a shared rhythm, a harmony that resonated deeply within her. You've done something wonderful today, she said. Strength isn't just about standing alone. Sometimes it's about standing together. As the class ended, the children left the room with lighter steps, their connections to one another just a little stronger. As Elara sat at her desk, her fingers brushing against the edge of the mural, she reflected on how their frequencies had changed. A rhythm beginning to align. She knew this was just the beginning of something extraordinary, a journey that would challenge and uplift them all. The weeks following the mural project brought a gradual, steady transformation among the students. Liam's once fiery energy had settled into something more focused, like a steady flame rather than a wild blaze. The faint sound of his pencil scratching against paper was no longer frantic, it was measured and purposeful. His determination, once fueled by frustration, now seemed guided by a growing sense of purpose. He approached his assignments with a methodical precision, surprising not only Elara but himself. Amina, likewise, began to show signs of growing strength. Her lines, once tentative and faint, now flowed more freely across her worksheets. She started to speak up, her soft voice gaining confidence as she contributed her ideas in class discussions. She still had moments where her shadows loomed, but the light inside her was becoming steadier, more vivid. Matteo, who once appeared on the verge of collapse, now carried himself with a tentative but undeniable courage. When he raised his hand, the soft rustle of his shirt seemed almost deliberate, as if he was finally comfortable taking up space. His answers, though still quiet, carried a newfound certainty. Elara could feel his frequency growing stronger, the once erratic flickers smoothing into a calm, steady glow. One afternoon, Elara gathered the 3 students at the front of the room. On the chalkboard behind her, she had written the word challenge in large, bold letters. Her cane rested against the desk as she faced them, her hands folded before her. You've all come so far, she began, but today I have something different for you, a challenge, together. The children exchanged uncertain glances. Liam's brow furrowed, and Matteo's hands twitched slightly, but Amina simply watched Elara with quiet curiosity. This isn't about grades or tests, Elara explained. It's about finding strength in each other. I'm going to give you a problem to solve, and I want you to work as a team to find the answer. Lean on one another, use your strengths, and support each other's weaknesses. Liam crossed his arms. What kind of problem? Elara smiled softly. One that requires more than just answers. It requires trust. She handed them a single piece of paper. On it was a riddle, a series of clues that led to a final answer. The room grew quiet as the 3 of them bent over the page, their heads close together. At first, the collaboration was uneasy. Liam's natural inclination was to take charge, speaking quickly and occasionally cutting off Matteo's softer suggestions. Amina stayed quiet, her voice barely a whisper when she offered her thoughts. As Elara watched them struggle to find a rhythm, she silently encouraged herself to stay patient. This was their journey, after all, and she needed to let them find their own way. Slowly, something shifted. Amina pointed to a line in the riddle. I think it's about finding something hidden, she said, her voice hesitant at first, then gaining strength as she noticed Liam listening. He paused for a moment, meeting her eyes before nodding in agreement, considering her words. Like a clue in the classroom? Matteo nodded. Maybe it's that book on the shelf, the one with the symbol on the spine. They moved as a unit, their energies no longer clashing but weaving together. Liam reached for the book, handing it to Amina. Matteo flipped it open and read the next clue aloud. Their frequencies, once so disparate, seemed to blend, forming a harmonious current that Elara could feel resonating throughout the room. When they finally solved the riddle, their smiles were wide, their voices overlapping with excitement. They had done it, together. Elara stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride. Do you see what happens when you trust each other? She asked. Liam nodded. Yeah, it's not so bad working together. Amina smiled softly. It's kind of nice. Matteo looked at the page in his hands, the final answer still written there. I didn't think we could do it, but we did. You've all shown tremendous growth, Elara said. Not just in solving problems, but in understanding that strength isn't about standing alone, it's about standing together. As the children left the classroom that day, their steps seemed lighter, their voices brighter. Elara remained behind, her fingers lightly brushing the chalkboard. The word challenge still stood there, bold and resolute. But to her, it was no longer just a challenge completed. It was a testament to how far they had come, and a reminder that there would be more challenges ahead, each one an opportunity to build on what they had already achieved. The progress made since their initial collaboration was unmistakable. Liam's confidence in his own abilities had grown immensely, allowing him to contribute more effectively to the group's efforts. He had moved from being a source of fiery, unbridled energy to a steady and reliable contributor. His ideas were no longer hurried and chaotic. Now they were measured, considered, and delivered with quiet determination. More than once, he had found solutions that inspired the others to think differently, his newfound patience and focus setting a tone of determination for the group. Amina's change was equally remarkable. The once shy girl who rarely spoke was now sharing her thoughts with calm confidence. Her previously faint lines of thought had become bold strokes of clarity. She had even taken the lead in a group discussion about the next steps in their project, her quiet voice rising above the murmurs until the others listened closely. Amina had begun to believe in her worth, and it showed in her willingness to take charge and gently correct her peers when needed. She no longer hesitated to raise her voice or express her opinions, and her influence on the group's harmony grew stronger every day. Matteo's steady growth was perhaps the most heartening of all. Where there had been hesitation and fear, there was now a cautious yet steady courage. He no longer questioned his right to be heard. Instead, he contributed consistently, his words infused with a quiet confidence. Matteo's presence was like a calming wave that helped balance the more intense energies of Liam and Amina. His ability to listen deeply and respond thoughtfully brought a sense of stability and trust to their dynamic. The pivotal moment came on a rainy afternoon. The classroom's windows streaked with rivulets of water, and the soft patter of rain seemed to echo their hesitation. Elara took a breath, steadying herself as she felt the anticipation building. The challenge before them was not just about solving a problem, but about proving to themselves how far they had come. The group was tasked with a particularly complex problem, one that required them to think critically and rely heavily on one another's strengths. At first, the old dynamic surfaced. Liam began to take over, Amina hesitated to speak up, and Matteo watched quietly from the side. But then something unexpected happened. "Wait," Matteo said softly, his voice firm but kind. "Liam, can you slow down a bit? I think Amina has an idea." Liam looked at Matteo, startled but not offended. For a moment, his usually assertive tone softened. "Oh, yeah, sure. What do you think, Amina?" he said, stepping back slightly. Amina's cheeks flushed, but she nodded. "I think, if we look at it from another angle, we might find a simpler solution." Together, they re-examined the problem. Amina presented her idea, Matteo refined it, and Liam handled the final calculations. The result was not just a correct answer, but a moment of shared pride. Their energies aligned, their frequencies harmonized, and an intense color frequency burst from Elara's perception, a radiant display of their collective strength and growth. She could feel the anticipation of what was to come, the potential brimming in these children's spirits, filling her with a deep, almost electrifying excitement. They had achieved something profound, and the future held even greater promise. Elara watched, her heart swelling with pride as the intense colors around her seemed to pulse in time with her emotions. The vivid hues, now brighter than ever, felt almost tangible, like a symphony of growth and potential unfolding before her. These children had found their strength not by relying solely on their individual talents, but by learning to trust and support one another. The colors were so vivid now, they felt as though they might break through the veil that had hidden her world. It was a beautiful, bittersweet moment, one that hinted at something greater still to come. Their shared journey had transformed them into more than a group of classmates. They were now a team. The classroom was alive with a tangible energy as the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Elara stood near the door, her cane resting against the wall as the children filed out one by one. Their laughter and chatter faded down the hall until the room grew quiet, the only sound now the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint rustle of papers. Elara turned toward the mural on the back wall, her fingers brushing against the chalkboard surface as she walked past it. The mural was still vibrant, alive with the colors that had represented each child's journey. But something felt different today. The colors were more vivid, more harmonious, as if the very walls of the room had absorbed the growth and resilience that had taken place here. Her own perception of the frequencies had changed as well. The once sharp contrasts between light and shadow had merged into something more fluid, warmer. For the first time in ages, she felt as though she stood on the brink of clarity. The glow she perceived was no longer a faint echo of the world around her. It was alive, shifting, and rich with promise. It was as though her world was preparing to show her a new dimension, a truth she had long yearned to see. The anticipation built steadily in her chest, a quiet crescendo that echoed the children's progress. Elara took her usual seat at her desk, her hand resting on its worn edge. She closed her eyes, letting the vibrations of the room wash over her. This was a place of transformation, not just for the students, but for herself as well. She had felt it in their laughter, in their whispered discussions, in the quiet moments of realization when one of them finally understood a new concept or overcame a long-standing fear. Her hands moved instinctively to the drawer where she kept the students' assignments. She pulled out the latest stack of papers, running her fingers over the smooth sheets. She could feel the texture of each stroke, the faint indentations left by pencils, and the subtle resistance of ink where students had pressed more firmly. These weren't just worksheets, they were markers of growth, evidence of the changes she had witnessed. Her heart swelled as she imagined the children's faces when they returned tomorrow, eager to share their ideas and continue building on the foundation they had laid. And then, something extraordinary happened. It began with a faint glow at the edges of her perception. A subtle flicker, barely more than a whisper of light, emerged in the quiet. Elara hesitated, her breath caught as the glow intensified. The hues deepened, each pulse growing sharper and more vivid, until they seemed to gather into a radiant, unified spectrum. The frequencies grew brighter, clearer, until they seemed to swirl and coalesce into a single, radiant spectrum. Elara's breath caught as the hues sharpened into shapes, forms she hadn't seen in so long that she barely recognized them. The desk before her came into view first, its smooth grain illuminated by sunlight streaming through the windows. The fine scratches on its surface seemed almost beautiful now, a testament to its long years of service. The mural on the wall came into focus next, its bold patterns and flowing colors more vibrant and dynamic than she ever imagined. And then she turned toward the doorway. There they were, Liam, Amina, and Matteo. As she gazed at them, memories of their journeys flickered through her mind. Liam's fiery determination had softened into a steady, guiding presence. Amina's gentle voice had become a beacon of clarity and insight. Matteo's quiet strength now radiated a calm, grounding energy. Their faces were alight with joy and pride, reflecting the transformations they had undergone. Tears filled Elara's eyes as she took in their features for the very first time. Liam's confident grin, Amina's warm smile, Matteo's steady gaze, each detail etched into her memory as a gift she never thought she would receive. Her tears spilled over, flowing freely as she whispered, "I see you." The children's expressions softened, their joy mirrored in her own. And in that moment, Elara understood that this was not just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a new one. Her sight was no longer limited by darkness or light. It was filled with the vibrancy of connection, growth, and love. It was a gift she would carry forever, a reminder of the incredible strength she had found, not just in herself, but in the children who had touched her life so deeply. As the final rays of sunlight bathed the room, Elara rose from her chair. The colors of the mural, the smiles of the children, the warmth of the room, they were all more than she could have imagined. To each of you who joined us on this journey and immersed yourself in the beauty of these frequencies, thank you from the depths of our hearts. Your presence and open-hearted spirit have made this experience all the more meaningful. And as she stepped forward, her heart full, she was ready to embrace the beauty of the world anew.